Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Mixology Talk Podcast, episode number 15, where we're going to be talking about what's going on in the world of craft cocktails so you can stay up to date without needing a handlebar mustache. You can have one, but you don't have to have one.
I've been growing mine out for ages.
So I'm Chris.
And I'm Julia, and today we're answering listener questions. I, first of all, really want to thank everybody who submitted questions on our website. We got some really great questions and a good variety as well. So if you have your own questions about bartending, cocktails, or anything else mixology related, head on over to mixologytalk.com/15 and let us know.
So our very first question actually comes from Jeff in Lafayette, and he writes, what is your preference in glassware? Is it glass, acrylic, or crystal? And how much of each type of glass do you need? So the first thing to consider, Jeff, is if it's for a home or for a bar. Now, if it's for a bar, I usually recommend glass. And in particular, for like pint glasses for beer, I recommend tempered glass. Now, I'm not sure if it's true or not, or just one of those urban legends that kind of gets passed down from generation to generation of bartenders. But the way you can always tell is that tempered glass will have a tiny little T stamped into the bottom of the glassware. Now,
and that's important because it's a safety thing, right?
Yeah, for us behind the bar, we go through a lot of temperature extremes. So imagine you put a pint glass through the dishwasher, and all of a sudden you need that pint glass again to make your next cocktail or whatever. But there's going to be a big range of temperatures that you'll need to kind of get through quickly. So normal glass, what will happen is if it's still warm, you add ice to it, and then you add any kind of pressure to it, it's going to crack, it's going to split, it's going to explode. Where tempered glass can kind of handle that kind of stress of temperature extremes and pressure as well.
Now, certainly glass will eventually break. That's just the nature of being around it for a long time, but it's certainly a good idea to minimize that possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's happened and kind of bit me a couple of times. So
that's for sure.
You definitely want to make sure that you take any kind of precautions that you can do safely.
Yeah. So at home, it's really just a matter of preference. For our home bar, which I will fully acknowledge is not a normal home bar.
What do you mean?
Most people don't build a full-size bar in their dining room.
Yeah, that's true.
Although I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Great idea. Most of our glass is from all kinds of stores. We don't really take this terribly seriously, to be honest with you. We've got glassware from Crate and Barrel, from IKEA, and actually quite a bit of it is from the local thrift store.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite places to find really cool, classic, old school glass pieces. Yeah, just something different that you're not going to find anywhere else. And it usually is so cheap that, you know, for a quarter or less than $1, you can have a really beautiful piece of glassware that you can serve amazing cocktails in.
And one nice thing about shopping in a thrift store is that you can have a tremendous variety without having to buy a whole set. So, I mean, yes, we have an unusually large bar, but believe it or not, we are running out of space for glassware. Chris has a glassware problem.
Yeah. Damn you, thrift store.
But the good thing is you know, if you're just going to use a cocktail once to take a beautiful picture or to have a variety, you don't need a whole bunch of them. And it's hard to do in a normal store. So the thrift store is a great place to find these sort of one-off glassware. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, as far as your other question, Jeff, about glass or crystal or acrylic, typically, I'm not a big fan of acrylic glass. I mean, there's definitely a time and a place for it. So, like if you're at a pool or you're at a beach or someplace that doesn't allow glassware, acrylic is a great option for you. For me, the thing that I don't like about acrylic is after a while, it begins to develop that spider webbing across it, and it's time to throw that away. So, whenever possible, I definitely prefer to use glass.
Yeah, I think glass is definitely a better option if you have the opportunity. Before we finish up, though, I think you also asked, Jeff, how many of each glass to have. And that's a bit of a tough question, to be honest with you. Again, it does depend if you're at home or in a bar or restaurant setting. But just from our own personal experience at our bar, it seems like our MO has been just keep buying glassware until it doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah, definitely. And, it also depends if you entertain a lot or, if it's just for a couple of people. Even if it's just, you're a big fan of single malt scotch. and you invest a lot of money in your single malt scotch, well, at that point, you might want to have a really, really beautiful piece of glassware that you can enjoy your scotch with. So it all depends on kind of what you're, going for. But, I'd say probably safe bet is probably anywhere from 6 to 8 pieces of the same kind of glass. It should get you through most any kind of normal dinner parties.
I think so, yeah. And if it's just, for example, if you're just a couple like Chris and I, if it was just us and we never entertained, I think we can get away with 4.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
So I hope that helps. It's a little bit of a cheater answer to your question, but I do think that there are some really great options out there for glassware, and I hope that you'll give them a try.
So yeah, Jeff, thanks for the great question, and hope it helped a little bit. So I know that there's a town pretty close to where we live called Lafayette. So if you're near us in California, and give us a wave if you see us at the local thrift store.
We'll be in the glassware section. The next question is from Diane from Napa, and she says, I recently enjoyed a cocktail called Hot Apple Pie, which had Tuaca in it. What other cocktails are made with Tuaca?
So for all of you that are not familiar with Tuaca, it's a really delicious sweet liqueur that focuses on citrus and vanilla. And according to their website, Tuaca was actually created for the ruler of Florence over 500 years ago. Now, this is one of the things that I love. I fell in love with very early on in my bartending career, and that is a lot of the bottles that we see on a normal day-to-day basis, either behind a bar or the supermarket or our own personal bar. Those brands and those bottles, many of them have been around for a long, long time, and they have a ton of history associated with them. What's funny is looking at the Tuaca bottle and hearing the name, I always assumed it was South American. Yeah,
Florence.
When I first came across it, I did as well.
I wasn't thinking Italy, that's for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of these brands have just been around for a long, long time. So just fascinating to think that Tuaca as a recipe was around for the Renaissance, for World War I, World War II, and just kind of how long it's been out there. Just kind of really fascinating to me.
Yeah, so in terms of recipes that you can make with Tuaca, what's the flavor like, Chris?
So, like I said, it's a lot more like citrus and very, very vanilla focused. So it has a lot of complexity to it. And one of my favorite ways of enjoying Tuaca, besides on its own, is actually to use it in a margarita.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, so it reinforces that citrus flavor and adds that vanilla note to it that just makes it really fantastic.
I'm pretty sure that you could put vanilla in pretty much anything I ever consumed, and I would be happy about that.
We're going to have to try that then.
Steak tartare, vanilla, totally.
All right then. Well, I think you've lost me, but I'm down for anything once.
Yeah, exactly.
And now you found a couple recipes that are showcasing Tuaca that sound really good.
Yeah, it really piqued my interest because I have heard of the spirit before, but I certainly didn't realize quite how far up my alley it was. So when I looked into it, I found a couple great recipes. There were several along the lines of a Tuaca punch. The one that I found that I liked the most, I used spiced rum, lemon juice, ginger, apple juice, and simple syrup.
This cocktail sounds like it was made for you.
I know, doesn't it?
Rum and ginger. Oh my God.
And apple juice. Oh man. I know, it's right up my alley. So
I'm going to leave you two alone here for a second.
I wish I had one. Oh my goodness. But definitely you can see how this recipe is made to feature that sort of sweet citrus and vanilla flavor. I think it would go really, really nicely. Full disclosure, I have not tried it, but I intend to do so in about 45 minutes. As soon as I can acquire some Tuaca.
So yeah, you could basically use Tuaca as a replacement for a lot of other sweet liqueurs in cocktail recipes. So for example, like we mentioned with the margarita, it can help to replace Cointreau or triple sec in your margarita. But you might have to adjust the recipe slightly since Tuaca tends to be a little on the sweeter side.
So thank you so much for your question, Diane. I think that a hot apple pie sounds like a fantastic cocktail, and I'm going to have to try one of those as well.
Perfect. So next up, we have a question from Austin, who comes from Miami, and he asks, how do you make a New Orleans-style hurricane like Pat O'Brien's? And to be completely honest with you, Austin, I've never had a Pat O'Brien's hurricane. I know I I'm embarrassed at the moment.
How dare you?
I know. I'm blushing.
I did a little bit of research, Austin, and I tried to find the recipe for you. And here's what I found. The recipe for a Pat O'Brien's Hurricane is 4 ounces of Pat O'Brien's Hurricane rum and 4 ounces of Pat O'Brien's Hurricane mix.
That sounds nice and easy.
So it's not very helpful.
No, not at all.
I tried. I did try. But what I did do is I did find a recipe for a New Orleans style hurricane, which is almost like a punch. Again, it's white rum, dark rum, lime juice, orange juice, passion fruit juice, simple syrup, and grenadine.
That sounds tasty.
I know. Doesn't it sound delicious? So I'm going to go ahead and include that link over in the show notes, which you can find at the usual location, mixologytalk.com/15.
Yeah, sorry I didn't have a better answer for you, Austin, but usually when I'm in New Orleans, I'm pretty focused on getting my craving in for those Sazeracs.
He has a Sazerac problem.
I love them, but definitely we're going to have to try them next time we go down there.
Well, now that I know the recipe, I'm absolutely going to be trying one because that sounds amazing.
So thanks for the suggestion, and thanks for the great question, Austin.
Last but not least, we got another question from Claudia from Southern. And I'm not sure, Claudia, if you're just from the South or if you work for Southern Wine and Spirits, but either way, thanks so much for your question.
So your question was, how long can you keep cocktail ingredients for? And this is a really great question, Claudia, and it's something I actually get asked a lot. So if you're talking about cocktail ingredients like simple syrup, purees, those are going to have a much lower shelf life. So typically simple syrups only last about a week to a couple of weeks. Purees can go bad anywhere from about 2 days. So you definitely want to use the freshest products possible whenever you're making cocktails, just like when cooking. Now, if you're talking about cocktail ingredients like liqueurs and base spirits, that's something I actually get asked a lot. So as far as alcohol goes, typically it doesn't really go bad.
I've read that it can kind of lose its luster, but I mean, haven't we heard stories of people drinking rum from shipwrecks and things like that?
Yeah, so if the alcohol percentage is high enough, typically like your normal base spirits are about 40% alcohol, they don't really go bad. So one of the other questions I actually get asked along these lines is, hey, I have this bottle of Macallan 12-year-old Scotch that my grandfather had in the 70s. Is it even better now? And the answer to that question is no, not really, because the Macallan 12, that number 12, means how long the spirit has actually stayed in contact with the barrel to extract all those flavors. So when it goes into a bottle, it doesn't really get better with age, kind of like wine does, but alcohol doesn't. So that's one of the questions I get asked a lot. Now that 1970 Macallan 12-year Scotch is still going to be damn good and still drinkable, but it doesn't get better with age like wine does.
So it seems like there's 2 major preservatives that are kind of at work behind the bar. There is alcohol, which is one type of preservative, and there's also sugar, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically, like the higher the sugar content, like in simple syrup or anything like that, the longer the shelf life is.
And similarly with the alcohol content, like you mentioned for base spirits.
Right. Yeah. So like one of the things I like to do when I make simple syrup is actually to add a little bit of vodka, and that'll help to increase the shelf life of the simple syrup by a couple more weeks. So at that point, it's, pretty good over a month.
Now I know why you use simple syrup in your coffee in the morning.
Next question.
Kidding.
But yeah, there are, along these same lines, there is one cocktail ingredient in particular that actually does get better with age, or it changes with age, and that is chartreuse.
Oh, really?
So chartreuse can definitely change with flavor, because one of the last things they do is actually infuse the spirit right before it goes into the bottle. So if you have chartreuse from a couple different years, then you will definitely notice subtle differences between the ingredients. And one of the seminars that I went to at Tales this last year was actually vintage chartreuse tasting, and it went back all the way to like the 60s.
And there was a real difference?
Huge difference.
Wow.
Yeah, even even within the same like green chartreuse, there was a huge difference between years. It was pretty amazing to see.
So for the most part, if you're looking at in terms of safety and quality and things like that, I've read that base spirits are at their best up to 8 to 12 months. And then if you are going on to other ingredients that have a lower alcohol content, like liqueurs, and then they'll have a shorter shelf life. Again, even further looking at things like vermouths and aperitifs that are more of a wine base, those should be kept in the fridge. And how long would you say that a vermouth lasts?
You want vermouth, just like with wine, you want to drink it as fast as possible. So
less than 3 minutes, preferably.
Exactly. Go. But one of the beautiful things about vermouth these days is actually you can buy them in half bottles. So if you're not going to go through a large, if you're not making Manhattans or martinis with vermouth on a regular basis, this is a really great option for you, is just to buy the half bottles, and you have you won't have to throw away or use it in cooking, and it'll still stay really fresh.
That's a great idea.
But yeah, typically you want to use it in a couple of months for sure.
So hopefully we answered your question, Claudia. There's a huge variety of different cocktail ingredients that you can find behind the bar, but hopefully that this was a little bit helpful. Yeah, and just a recommendation, keep those bottle lids nice and tight and keep them out of direct sunlight, and it'll really help to preserve the integrity of the spirit that you want to hold on to. Yeah, I think that sunlight is a really good point. So, thanks to everybody that asked the questions, to Jeff, Diane, Austin, and Claudia. Thank you for those great questions. And next week, we're going to be diving into the mysterious world of tequila, and we're going to be offering up some of our favorite tequila cocktails. I can't wait. Everything's going to get a little crazy. Chris loves tequila. I do. Who doesn't? So thank you to everyone that left us a review in iTunes. It means a lot to hear your positive comments, so please keep them coming. So thanks again, Mom, and everyone else for the positive feedback. Come back next week to find out what to do with that dusty old bottle of Cuervo. Have a great one, everyone, and cheers. Never miss an episode by subscribing in iTunes or YouTube. And as always, check out the show notes by clicking on the right.